What's up, everyone? Connor O'Hanlon here for another episode of the Greater Society podcast. And today we are going to be going over a lot of different topics. We're having the widest range you could possibly get in political podcasting topics, I think, today within the hour that we normally do on the show. We're going to start off talking about the most influential piece of legislation that is going to be passing this week, which is the Respect for Marriage Act that has been signed into law by President Biden yesterday. I had to think about which day it was. It's been a busy few couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the implications of that, the benefits, the shortcomings, and we're also going to be talking about the political implications of it moving forward. Speaking of political implications, we're going to be talking about FTX, which is something that I've been wanting to talk about for a long time here, but knowing that things were changing very fast, I held off, and I'm glad I did, and I think now is the right time to discuss it. The bankruptcy, the corruption, the fraud, the fetishization of wealth, and the altruistic billionaire, or I should put that heavily in quotes, and all of the implications of that and what it means for us moving forward and how someone like that got that much influence in American politics and American society at large. And then, last but not least, we're going to be talking about Kyrsten Sinema leaving the Democratic Party, which did happen about last Thursday. So it's about as far away from an episode can be when we talk about these issues, but it's still very relevant in moving all of these stories forward and moving any sort of legislation through the Senate forward, and frankly, judicial picks, which, as we talked about last week, is largely what's going to be going on in the Senate for President Biden. So, without any more filibustering, let us dive right into it and talk about the major legislation that is passing this week, or that has been passed this week and signed into law by President Biden. And that is the Respect for Marriage Act. So I'm going to show us a little clip here real quick. It's from USA Today, and we'll give you a little bit of the overview, and we will jump from there.
The White House yesterday, President Biden signing the Respect for Marriage Act during a ceremony on the South Lawn. The law requires states to recognize same-sex and interracial marriages, even if they were performed in another state. The president emphasized bipartisan support for the legislation and called it a vital step toward equality, liberty, and justice.
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't miss.
You're good. Don't need to listen to that guy. But so that is the overview. That is the broad strokes what is going on with this bill. So let me break it down for you a little bit more in depth. The Respect for Marriage Act was kind of the stopgap, the preventive stopgap to the Supreme Court overturning Obergefell, which is the Supreme Court case that has allowed for legal gay marriage across the country. Prior to Obergefell in 2013, I believe is when that decision came out. Gay marriage was state by state decision. So again, where we come back to this federalist approach, these things where things are delegated to the states based on the Constitution. I believe that's the Ninth Amendment. All that stuff, right? We have the application of this in the same way from gun laws, now we have it in abortion laws, and there are, those two things alone are bad examples of federalism gone awry, but there are good examples of federalism, especially on the local level. When you look at city governments, getting my master's, we definitely learned about Philadelphia government and the good and the bad and the ugly, and just talking about each level and the localities and the mayors and the local offices having a more influence is good in certain aspects when they're passing progressive legislation. But again, that comes with the understanding that in other red places they're passing Republican legislation. So with that being said, this was the stopgap. Like, this was the idea that it's going to be, okay, we're going to pass this and we're going to protect people from losing the right to have same-sex marriage. It also protects interracial marriage, which again is pretty insane that we have to do that in 2022, basically 2023. But it's also not wholly unreasonable to predict that that was something that was on the docket based on the leaked the Dobbs decision that was leaked, the brief that was leaked from Justice Alito, which literally said that we're targeting the cases that protected the birth control, protected same-sex marriage, and interracial marriage. So in practicality, as much as it might seem like, oh, this seems like kind of outlandish, like, is this really an issue? Yeah, it is, and it possibly could be. So good on the Democrats for passing this, and I'll frankly give some credit to the Republicans that crossed over. Now, again, it's not all of them. I think this is one of those things where you start to realize, like, this is not like a 99% of people are, I should say Congress people are passing this. There were still like a solid portion of Republicans that are voting against this bill. And it makes no sense. I mean, it makes no sense from my point of view, right? From their point of view, all these folks are the ones that are saying that, like, no, we're not homophobic. No, we're not transphobic. No, we're not racist. But yeah, I don't know that I could vote to protect interracial marriage. Yeah, I don't know that I could vote to protect same-sex marriage. Like, why not? Like, none of it is taking away anybody else's rights. Like, that's always the trick to this. Is it's just providing equality for everyone. And I just don't understand the ideology driven behind, like, undermining it consistently over and over and over again, and otherizing people based on it. It's something that I just never understood one way or the other. Even growing up Catholic, I just never had this disconnect where I didn't understand or empathize, at least on some level, with people that were gay. I mean, as a kid, I didn't know about people that were transgender just because being sheltered in that environment. But when I went to public school, when I moved, when I got older, you're around people and you learn things and you just engage with people, and you just, on a basic level, can develop that I may not live the same life as you, but I can understand that you just want to be happy. You just want to have a good life like everybody else. And this piece can help you do that. And it's just providing equality. Now, why am I not jumping up and down saying this is the best thing ever? Well, the thing is, and this is the tricky part of this bill that I think people are overlooking. With the passage of this Respect for Marriage Act, that does not protect same-sex couples getting married everywhere. What it does instead, if you get married now, let's just say right now, we'll take Senator Mitch McConnell's area, Kentucky. If you took Kentucky, you got married as a same-sex couple right now, and a year down the line, Obergefell is overturned. Again, remember that the Supreme Court doesn't actually give a shit about precedent. So likely that is a very possible thing that could happen. If that happened, this bill prevents the state of Kentucky, or any state for that matter, that doesn't recognize gay marriage, from not recognizing that person's marriage, because it was done under this protection. It was done with this law protecting that right and carrying it forward. Sounds great, right? But the issue is that if you are in Kentucky or if you're in a red state, because this is frankly where this would happen, or even a purple state with a red legislator like someplace like Wisconsin was, where it's not really a red state, but it is gerrymandered out the wazoo so that you have state legislators overrun by Republicans. Frankly, Pennsylvania could have been the same thing if we didn't get Shapiro and we didn't get better maps in Pennsylvania. What happens is, if you were living in this red state, you're not married now, Obergefell falls, and I believe the case for same-sex or for interracial marriages, the case was Loving, I think. If both of those were overturned, the precedent is thrown out by the Supreme Court, which again, 6-3. It is very likely, or possible at least, that this would happen. A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if this was overturned, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and you went to get married as a same-sex couple, that would not, well, I should say this. If the state does not recognize it, this is the real twist here. If these states decide to not recognize gay marriage, if they outlaw gay marriage, which again, based on the interpretation of the Supreme Court of federalism and the supremacy, so like the way that structures up, the federal court or the federal government has the ultimate say. But if the federal government says, well, actually we're going to defer, then the states can ban gay marriage again if Obergefell goes to the wayside. And then people in those states where the state decides to outlaw it, like abortion, they cannot get married. Same-sex couples would not be able to get married. Interracial couples would not be able to get married if that case fell too. So this is where it's not, it's great, but it's not the silver bullet. It's not Civil Rights Act level protections, which is really what we need. And again, I have so many people that are impacted by this that I know. There's so many people just on my social media feed that I've met over the last 3, 4, or 5 years that I've made, political contact with, just, knocking on their door, learning from them. Someone like Malcolm Kenyatta coming on the show, people like Brian Sims. There's folks like this that are at the White House, and it's awesome to see. I saw, Jonathan Lovitz. There's a bunch of people that I've connected with and I've met that I know personally are affected by this bill passing in the positive. I just freaking wish that I could just say, we have civil rights protections for gay people, for transgender people, for non-binary people, but we don't yet. And that is the next fight to continue moving the ball forward. This is a great step towards that. And I think it is worth stating that this is some of the most influential and progressive pieces throughout the last 2 years of Biden's administration. This is some of the most, and I don't say this lightly. I don't say this as this big Biden stan. Some of what Biden has done, and I say some of it because, again, you can go back just 2 weeks ago and me going ballistic about the unions, the railroad strikes, right? But some of what Biden has done in the last 2 years can amount to some of the most progressive legislative agenda that has probably been implemented since LBJ. I'm trying to put it nicely, but I can't. The bastardization of the old school Democratic Party from the neoliberalism era onward has made it so that we have been so weak as to tackle these great things about this country. I was talking when I was getting a haircut today. I was talking to the barber, talking about the fall of these great progressive ideals of the New Deal, the Great Society, and fighting for something like I don't understand. I really just don't understand it. And I am like, disconnect this from a criticism of Joe Biden here, but I'm just saying this as like I don't understand how the priority is not to pass civil rights protections based on sexual orientation at a minimum. At a minimum. The overwhelming majority of Americans support gay people's right to get married. It is not even a question at this point. Like, put it in the federal law. Put it in, sign, seal, deliver it to freaking Joe Biden's desk and have him put it into law, because it is so basic. Like, it is so clear that that is what we need. It is something that will actually provide a constitutional right to people for their civil protections. I am grateful that this passed. I am hopeful that we can do more. I just hope that we don't lose sight that this is not the end. This is the beginning of something. It is hard when you haven't had like real fighters for a while on some of this stuff. But it's really it's just tough. I mean, it's tough to like really be like, yeah, and then it's not fully what it is. Question in chat: the Respect for Marriage Act just ensures that states where gay marriage is outlawed have to recognize the marriage that happened in other states' rights. Yeah, so that's the other piece of it. If you get married in New York and you move to, maybe I'll stop picking on Kentucky, but Kentucky, and they decided to outlaw it, yeah, then they have to, by federal law, recognize that marriage. And it's the same thing where, like, if you got married now and it got overturned, they would have to respect that and acknowledge that legally. But you get into gray areas from there where it's like, well, okay, they could legally. I mean, this kind of lends itself to more of a broader narrative of combating racism in today's society, right? Like, in theory, there are no laws, and again, I am not a believer of this, but in theory, there are no laws explicitly, because again, we have the Civil Rights Act, explicitly targeting black people in this country disproportionately to put them down, right? Because it would be deemed unconstitutional based on the Civil Rights Act protections. But we all know, if you're watching this show, you're listening to my voice 10 years from now, we know that the history of slavery, the history of Jim Crow, the implementation of laws, the nuance of laws, how they're written, how they're implemented, does impact folks differently. And in America, has disproportionately affected African American people. So, if we can take that extrapolation and say, yeah, we'll recognize in the red state here, we'll recognize your marriage, right? We'll recognize it legally. But that doesn't mean that you're entitled to all the same services. And then what happens is then you have more Supreme Court cases, which again, the Supreme Court is stacked against same-sex couples. It is stacked against transgender individuals. stacked against all of the anything that I could think to say to you, it is stacked against the proposal of Medicare for all. You could never pass a Green New Deal agenda with a 6-3 Supreme Court conservative majority, because it's about their ideology. It is not about precedent. It is not about the law. It is not about interpreting the Constitution. It is about their damn agenda. There's been resurfaced videos just in the last couple of weeks. I saw it on Twitter. I knew it when he was getting confirmed, but dude, there are videos of Brett Kavanaugh in 2000 cheerleading for George W. Bush, basically for the Supreme Court to hand George W. Bush the election. I mean, this is not the Supreme Court is not impartial. That concept is dead. It was never true, but it's most certainly not true now. So, as an activist, I'm wearing my HRC shirt right here. As an activist, for me as an ally, for you watching, you might be someone that is impacted by this law. Celebrate it. Be happy. Be enthusiastic. I've seen all of my political friends that are at the White House. I'm a little jealous. It's awesome. But we can't miss the forest for the trees, because we have to keep moving the ball forward. We have to keep pushing it forward. If you're in Pennsylvania, if you're a state rep and you're not running on enshrining civil rights on a state level for gay and trans individuals and non-binary individuals, then you are not focused on what needs to be done for those communities. So it's bread and butter. Again, that is the easiest thing that you can do in advocating for. And yet many people don't do that. And so that is the way to move it forward. Now, from you and me, the average Joe, we don't have the ability yet to pass legislation ourselves. Call your representative. Get engaged. I swear, calling your actual representative, emailing them, calling's better. Pressure them on supporting stuff like this, supporting things like the Respect for Marriage Act on a state level, supporting things that will actually enshrine rights to you, your neighbors, your kids, your friends, whoever it is. Everybody deserves equality, and that shouldn't be a question. We're fighting for it, but that shouldn't be a question in the 21st century, and it still is. So we'll keep moving that fight forward. And I'm hopeful. I'm grateful. Again, Biden doing that, the Congress passing it, and for the few Republicans that crossed over. And we gotta get more than just a few. So with that being said, this I'm gonna lead into with a little bit of a different approach here. I'm finding this very interesting, this crypto FTX thing, and I was hesitant to cover my initial reaction, because my initial reaction was Elon Musk saying, "Oh, they'll never investigate this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried," he's referring to, and I'll lay out all the players here in a second. And I was like, why not? And he's like, because he's just a giant Democratic donor. They will never investigate him. And give it 1 week and everything has changed. So my initial reaction was to look and talk about some of this stuff 2 weeks ago. And I held off, thank goodness, because it gave me about a bit of time to read up and understand the players a little bit more, because up front, I don't trade in cryptocurrency. I frankly don't believe in cryptocurrency as a legitimate currency. And I will connect all of this to the political aspect here, but I think it's important to note like all of this from all the different angles. I'll explain some stuff from an accountant angle, and I will explain some of this from a political interpretation angle. But first, I want to show you the most ironic commercial that could possibly exist for FTX.
Like I was saying, it's FTX. It's a safe and easy way to get into crypto.
I don't think so. And I'm never wrong about this stuff. Never.
So it's that's the that's the updated version where Larry's actually right. So if you saw last year's Super Bowl, FTX bought these giant advertisements featuring Larry David, featuring all these different celebrities, talking about how it's the best place to buy and sell cryptocurrency. And of course, you know, if you've watched Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry is, you know, the skeptical, bitter old man. And he's like, yeah, no, probably not. And like the whole joke is that they're making fun of him for being an old, you know, geezer, basically behind the times. But Larry in the commercials is right, because if you kept your money out, you're better off for the most part. I mean, I'm sure there's some people out there that probably got rich. So let me explain what is going on, because I think a lot of people rightfully don't know what's going on, because there is there genuinely is a lack of coverage on this. So I will tell you, I've read a few articles, I've listened to interviews on mainstream media, I listened to an interview of David Dayen with Jon Stewart, and I have also listened to a few interviews of this online guy, I think his name's CoffeeZilla, interviewing Sam Bankman-Fried himself. I've watched this guy get interviewed about the interviews and the alleged fraud. So like I did a lot of due diligence in the last week, I should say, regarding this, because it's very interesting from my perspective being an accountant and understanding how these overlapping pieces work. So with that being said, let me lay the groundwork for you, and we'll go from there. First things first, what the hell is FTX? FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange. So basically, it's one of those, for simplicity's sake, an app that you can go and you can buy and sell crypto. It's like Coinbase, or another one is Binance. And Binance is like I said, it's another form of a cryptocurrency marketplace where you can sell it. What happens on these is they make money just from the trades. They make money just from small fees, doing this, that, and the other thing, just like you would if you were trading stocks like TD Ameritrade or Wells Fargo, whatever all that stuff is, right? Simple. That's the marketplace. Now, there is this guy, Sam Bankman-Fried, who, and he is a little bit of a goofy character. He doesn't look like the fraudster you would expect him that he ends up being exactly. He kind of just looks like a gamer bro, just hanging out, playing some video games. But this dude was the CEO. Well, he was the founder and for a little while the CEO of something called Alameda. And Alameda is a hedge fund for cryptocurrencies specifically. But a hedge fund is basically just an amalgamation of stocks, different investments, bonds, and all of it is put together and people invest in it, and it kind of moves and goes up and down together, right? Sam Bankman-Fried sounds like he's about to be Sam I can't even see the last word. I butchered your joke. Yeah, so what happens here is that Alameda was the beginning of Sam Bankman-Fried's engagement with cryptocurrency beyond him just being a stock broker basically on Wall Street. So he worked on Wall Street, then he started his own thing when he was in his early 20s, because I think he's still in his 20s. Or maybe he's 31. He was born in 92. I don't know why I remember that, but with that, he started this with a bunch of other guys, right? Made a lot of money. The way they make money, this is Alameda, not FTX. We'll get there in a second. I know there's a lot of lead up to it. Alameda makes money, or it did, by basically buying cryptocurrencies. Let's just use Bitcoin as the example, in, let's say, America, and then selling them internationally into an exchange where the exchange rate is different. So basically, it's like buying a United States dollar and then selling it over in Japan in exchange for their currency when that currency has a different value there, right? And you're making margins on those slight trades. Now, cryptocurrency is unregulated, so you have a lot more range in the value. So they make a ton of money that way. It's an algorithm, so it would basically just, it was just based on math. It would just do this, trigger, boom, sell. This, trigger, boom, buy. And made a lot of money. But it wasn't enough money. Because it never is for some of these guys, right? So that greed drove him to start FTX, which was invested in by Binance, which again was the other trading platform, which got it off the ground. But then FTX just started blowing up because FTX was really cheap. You could buy all this cryptocurrency. You could do all this stuff with very low fees. And they have this CEO that's this really, I have to look up I wrote it down. It was, he coined this phrase that effective altruism, which is functionally just saying, he's a really nice guy, even though he's a billionaire. He's just a really nice guy. He cares about giving money back. He gives to charity. He starts this and does that, whatever. I'll get to that, why it's all bunk eventually, but just note that this was the perception he was building. And he was working on creating this, and this is where it starts to overlap with the political piece. He was beginning to develop this relationship where he was the front-facing guy that was this effective altruist, and he was just the philanthropist, nice billionaire. Yeah, he had a lot of money, but he cared about giving back. And what happened was he gave millions of dollars to Democratic candidates. And that is the highlighted part by Elon Musk that, everyone kind of ran with. Oh, he's not going to get investigated because he gave all his money to Democrats. Now, not knowing this could be very damning, but the reality is that a counterpart that also worked in FTX used a dark money pack to give the exact same amount of money to Republicans as well. And the reason they were doing this, basically, is to develop that public image, to develop the nice guy that's coming in to say, oh, it's kind of like what Mark Zuckerberg kind of did with Facebook a little bit, right? Where he goes, oh, don't worry, you want to regulate cryptocurrency? You should bring me in. I'm an expert on cryptocurrency. You should let me come in and tell you how to regulate it because I know how to work it. It's like saying, hey, I trade derivatives all day. You should come and let me make the decisions on how to regulate the derivatives. It doesn't make any sense. It's just letting letting the fox out and I can't even think of the right freaking metaphor, because it's just absolutely insane to go through that and say, yeah, this totally makes sense. Yeah, we want all the social media companies to regulate themselves. Yeah, we want cryptocurrency companies to regulate themselves, even though they make money off of not being regulated, and they can scam and rip off their customers. We're almost at the fraud piece here too. So what happens is there starts to be some back and forth beefing about what had happened with Binance originally. Again, Binance not buying FTX in the beginning, but financing them in the beginning. And in exchange, FTX gives Binance cryptocurrency. But hear me out. It's not a Bitcoin. It's not Ethereum. It's none of these normal. It's not Dogecoin. They give Binance FTT, which is FTX's cryptocurrency that they made up. Okay, that's fine, right? If they accept that, they accept that. But what happens is, in November, Binance looks at the balance sheet. So the balance sheet is basically it looks at your assets, liabilities, and equity for a company. One of the major documents for a financial statement for a company. On that balance sheet, an overwhelming majority of assets held by Alameda and FTX are FTT, which is just that FTX token. So Binance basically says, this company's not worth anything. We're going to sell all of our FTTs. But what happened then is they had, I think it was like $3 billion worth of this token. And that might be a misquote. So just take that with an asterisk. They go and sell, Binance does, all of its investment in FTT, which effectively what happens then is when the supply goes up, the price goes down. It's like stocks, right? If I have a stock in Connor Corporation and I have one stock, that one stock is whatever the value of the company is. If I have 1,000 shares of stock, that 1,000 shares is divided by the total value, and you get a price per share. Now, cryptocurrency, not so simple. It's metaphorically similar, but it is not so. It's not exactly one for one. So you look at the supply, and you look at the amount of coins. That's the way you look at it instead. And as they're selling them, the amount of coins in the exchange just skyrockets up, dropping the price down. And then normal people, let's just say you or me, were invested in FTT, or we're using FTX, which is largely supported by FTT as the value, how they get money. Because this is also important to note. Companies get debt based on their assets. Like you can leverage your assets, but the thing is they were leveraging FTT, which is not a real thing. Let's just keep reminding ourselves that cryptocurrencies are not real. Like they exist in the ether, but it's not a real thing. So they would end up not being able to finance stuff. They would not be able to buy. They are losing liquidity, which just means they have no cash on hand. So when someone like me or you wants to go and cash out our investments in FTT, or any of our investments on FTX for that matter, there's no money. And why was there no money? Because Sam Bankman-Fried, allegedly, and through coordination of FTX and Alameda, commingled funds from average traders like you or me, and put it, instead of holding it in FTX, which is the trading platform, moved it over to Alameda into the hedge fund. And when all of the FTT shot down, the value of the hedge fund dropped, and there's no cash to pay back the people that are trying to pull their money out. The easy comparison here is saying the Great Depression. Everybody knows the story of the Great Depression where everyone was running to the bank saying, I need to get my money out of the bank, whatever. Like, I have $10,000 there. I have to go get it. And then the banks just have no money, leading to the crash that happened. This is the exact same thing. This is literally the exact same thing. Now, to be fair, this is one of the crypto exchanges, but it is a major crypto exchange. And the biggest, saddest part of this is what happens in a liquidation or a bankruptcy, because this is what happens then is when all of that happened, the company goes under and they liquidate all the assets, and then they pay out the biggest debtors first, and they prioritize them. So if I had $10 million that FTX owed me, I'd be prioritized over average Joe that might have had their life savings, but it might have only been $10,000 or $20,000 in Bitcoin on FTX. So when it dissolves, all the little guys get screwed. All of this is happening, and the fraud would have never been caught. Or maybe it would have eventually, but it wouldn't have been caught if Binance didn't sink FTX by selling off all of the coins, which created that liquidity shortage. And we would have never known that, again, allegedly, FTX and Alameda were commingling funds illegally, which is just fraud, by the way, and using them to trade cryptocurrency. Again, another connection here is this is the exact same thing, and some of you that remember Bernie running in 2016, this is what Glass-Steagall was used for in the banking industry, to keep banking institutions from trading institutions and commingling funds, not being able to take from a bank and send it over into an investment fund. But of course, remember that Glass-Steagall doesn't exist anymore. It was gutted in the Clinton administration. But it's the exact same thing. So what does this all mean? Why am I talking about it? What it really means is that, first of all, that crypto is hurting. I've never believed in cryptocurrency personally. I've never thought that without like the physical tangibility of having like something actually there, that it's worth anything. I know that a lot of people invested in it, and that's fine. Like, it's, different theory, right? For me, I just don't engage with that. But the overall market for cryptocurrency is in rough shape from this. So I think the trust for people is down the drains. I think that people are not gonna, I don't know. I think that people are starting to become more skeptical of billionaires, which is what we should be. Talking about that effective altruism, the utilitarian nature of the Tony Stark-esque character, is not real. It's not real. they're playing characters. They're playing a role that gets them in a position to make more money. Again, knowing that if he is the front-facing guy and he just gives it to Democrats, then the Republicans will be, average Joe Republicans will be saying, oh, he's just a liberal, he's just a liberal shill. He's just giving all his money to them, not even recognizing that they're giving the exact, not close to the same, not half, the exact same amount of money to Republicans to make sure that there is no regulation on cryptocurrency, or that if there is regulation, that they're in the room to help decide it. And I'll remind you, they're not giving donations to the progressive left. They're giving donations to corporate Democrats, the ones that they can get. So it leads us to this: what do we do from here? And it amplifies a message that we've talked about here a few times. And it's dismantling the idea of the fetishization of wealth in America. Wealth being the driving factor here does not make anyone an expert in anything other than what they might be an expert in. That lane that they might make money in, that sliver, that might be their expertise. But you look at Elon Musk, you look at Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all these different people that are billionaires. People like them, people don't like them. Whatever. They're people. They're flawed. They have interests. They have expertise. Their expertise over here doesn't make them an expert in their interest. Because you can make money here doesn't mean that you can fix the healthcare system or the education system over here with the stroke of a pen. That's just not how it works. In America, we have started to see the decline of the greed is good fantasy and start to recognize, and I think this is because the rise of the millennial generation and with the Zoomers as well, we will start to continue down that path of just because you're rich doesn't mean you're a good guy. Just because you're rich doesn't mean that you earned it. Just because you're rich doesn't mean that you deserve more than your neighbor or the guy down the street, or frankly the homeless person that is overlooked while you are lifted up on a pedestal. Because while the Bezos of the world are labeled as these liberal activists, real progressives are talking about taxation reforms that would actually take money, redistribute it, get people off the street, get food in bellies of kids, get food on the back of people, get shelter, like provide clean water. This is really the crux of this. The obsession with these billionaires continues to blind people to the blatant fraud that's happening right in front of them. Cryptocurrency, these markets are ripe for fraud, ripe for manipulation, ripe for the standard issues of finance with no regulation whatsoever. And furthermore, the other day now, Sam Bankman-Fried gets arrested in the Bahamas, because I didn't even mention that. The company is based out of the Bahamas because it's a tax haven. But because of the amount of money, and I'm going to pull up the exact... So it was... Yeah. So in the Bahamas, I think he owed like some extreme amount of money. I can't find it off the top of my head. I have a couple articles over here, but regardless. and they arrested him. And they're like, for him to get extradited to the United States, it'll be interesting to see. He was supposed to testify before Congress, and I had pulled a clip of AOC interviewing this guy, John J. Ray III, who this is their new CEO. So I'll close with this, actually. But John J. Ray III is a lawyer who specializes in liquidations, right? So he worked on the Enron liquidation. So if you went to business school, or if you just existed in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Enron scandal is the textbook definition. Like, literally, not like not like in theory it's a textbook definition. Like, I went to business school, and in the textbook, Enron is the definition of fraud. And this guy, the new CEO that is taking over the liquidation for FTX, said that FTX makes Enron look like a joke. So we're just getting started on this, but from a political point of view, I just want to continue to point out that the right wing will always try to point out hypocrisy, saying, why aren't you investigating this guy? Why aren't you doing that to this? Why don't you look at there? And yet, they were actually going to investigate Sam Bankman-Fried. He will likely be in prison. He's in prison. He's going to be in prison in the Bahamas. But I'm saying, even if he gets him to the United States, he will be in prison. He's blaming it on his girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend, I don't know, who is the CEO or was the CEO of Alameda. Talk about nepotism. But that is the type of thing where it's like, no, we're putting people like AOC to interview them. We're putting people that care about fighting this stuff and prosecuting them, because white collar crime is much more rampant in America than that average day, violence that is spread across our local media everywhere. These are the people that you need to make sure that we're taking them off the streets and redistributing that wealth, because they're stealing it from everyday average Joes. They're just taking it from everybody and running rampant with it. But with that being said, let's talk about the last piece here. And that is Kyrsten Sinema leaving the Democratic Party. And I would love to hear some hot takes in the chat about this. But I'll keep it nice and short. But Kyrsten Sinema has been a thorn in the side of Democrats for the last 3 or 4 years, specifically under Joe Biden. It has been very frustrating that Kyrsten Sinema, who originally was a Green Party member, is outflanking Joe Biden on the right on every single policy proposal that he has. And yeah, it's a bit insane. And Joe Biden is definitely not FDR for any stretch. I know I was giving him props for his progressive agenda, but by no means is he, FDR or even LBJ. It's not that controversial to be promoting some of this stuff and running on it. But Sinema has aligned herself much more closely with Manchin in many ways, where they can thwart, Build Back Better. They can thwart different proposals, right? And she has finally decided, after the Democrats get Warnock reelected, which is ironic, I think, because I do think that this was planned one way or the other, to switch parties, not to Republican, but from Democrat to Independent. What does this mean? In effect, this is just, or it was, just a publicity stunt. Because what happens is, if you're like Bernie is an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats. And if you caucus with the Democrats, then that counts towards your committee positions. It counts towards your overall vote totals, right? You start like all of the minutia of actually just running a government administration. It's all the same. So she decides that she's going to be caucusing with the Democrats, even though she's an independent. So functionally, nothing has changed with her switching to an independent. It was all about all eyes on me kind of thing. The real catch here, and it's interesting, to reflect on with Warnock getting reelected. The real thing here is, in 2 years, she's up for reelection. If Sinema is running as an independent, as she says she will, do the Democrats run and field a candidate that can actually beat her outright? Oh, my fire alarm's going off, so might have to end the show here. So with all that said, guys, I'll see you next time.